Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes and be inspired by how they've overcome adversity. My name is Anthony Codispoti, and today's guest is the principal at A-Frame Venture Studio, Amber Brandner. They are a venture studio that builds purpose-driven consumer goods and tech focused on health and well-being through a holistic approach. Amber works encompassing brands, products, partnerships, experience, and people with a collective offering, strategic support for responsible and sustainable growth. Amber is a passionate leader with a deep curiosity and our collective potential, a creative force working at the intersection of venture, narrative, and collective intelligence. Her work lives where systems meet soul, designing ventures, environments, and ecosystems that foster authentic collaboration, emotional depth, and regenerative growth. She is co-owner at Mirth Water, where they are on a mission to improve emotional well-being and healthy hydration. Amber currently serves on the advisory board for the Center for Applied Ethics and Values in Emerging Technology at UCSC. She's also an alumni entrepreneur in residence at UCSD's Office of Innovation and Commercialization, and a mentor at Blackstone Launchpad. She is the director of the docu-short Between Narratives, a poetic inquiry into the space between paradigms, and brings a systems-literate, humanity-centered lens to every project she joins. Her leadership skills have developed at organizations such as TEDx, the National Science Foundation, World Economic Forum, and Singularity U. Amber brings a wealth of hands-on expertise to her role, emphasizing impact-driven strategies and community-focused development. Now, before we get into all that good stuff, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. Imagine being able to give your employees free access to doctors, therapists, and prescription medications in a way that puts more money in your staff's pockets and the company's too. As an example, one recent client with 450 employees boosted net profits over $412,000 a year. Results vary for each company, and some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, contact us today at addbackbenefits.com. All right, back to our guest today, the principal at A-Frame Venture Studio, Amber Brandner. I appreciate you making the time to share your story today.
Thank you for having me.
So Amber, as I look at your career path, it's very fluid and multidimensional. ICU nurse, venture studio founder, building community art spaces, you're shaping, future forward businesses. I want to try and walk through some of those major chapters with you. You started in ICU, working with cardiac patients, managing code blue teams, and even training in palliative care. That's a high stakes, deeply human environment. Can you take me back to that time? What did those experiences teach you?
Yeah. Well, connecting the dots is always fun. I love looking back and thinking, how did this one connect to the next one? Those golden nuggets. I started in ICU when I was 19 years old, and I went into nursing really thinking, I think I was the first in my family to go to college. So it was a very kind of pragmatic choice of, I'm good at science. I like people. Let me, do this thing. It's a good living. And so I chose that path for that kind of reason. And I chose ICU specifically because it was the most challenging. And I guess that I just maybe liked the idea of a bit more control around things and being able to help people in the worst situations. But for a while after I left nursing, I actually wanted really to separate myself from that identity. I would feel like, especially in the first couple of years, people saying like, my nurse friend, Amber. I'm like, I am not your nurse friend.
You didn't want that to be like that much of your identity?
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt like what we do is not who we are. Okay. And I think that when you have a role like a nurse, people often kind of hold it up as like, that is, that's your profession becomes a huge part of your identity. And when I left nursing after having been in it since I had been 19, it felt like I had to kind of like rebrand myself for myself. Like I was trying to understand who I was after leaving that. But I struggled to the point of like, what did I gain from that? At first I was like, oh, I'm like hiding this part of myself. And then I realized over the years of just like how much came in from like multi-stakeholder conversations, having like all these different physicians for different organ systems, right? Plus case managers, plus your social workers, and every day having to really look at the big picture and bring everybody up to speed and manage the needs of everybody and communicate clearly. When I left that, I went into kind of a large-scale event production with TEDx, and I remember hosting these events and people being like, Amber, you're so calm. Like, what's going on? I'm like, nobody is dying. Nobody's trying to die.
Everything you hear is really low stakes.
So you end up like being able to, I think the biggest thing it taught me is perspective and the brevity of life. Being 19 years old and being with people who are passing or have regrets in their life, or family members who wish they had been more present and there with their family before their loved one was ill. It taught me massively about the inequalities in our society and how that shows up in so many ways, from compliance of your health regimen to preventative care to the dignity that you have in your dying. And the palliative care piece, it's still part of life, right? Like this is still a phase of life. I learned a lot from it.
Yeah. And then at some point you started moving more towards creative strategy, systems design, social entrepreneurship, which is kind of more where you find yourself today. I'm curious, as you kind of look back and connect those dots, was there a specific moment, maybe a slow realization that told you it was kind of time to shift this focus?
So 2 parts. One was the jolt away from nursing, which happened after a couple of night shifts I worked, and I had a car accident. And in that car accident, I felt essentially like I had been kind of given an opportunity. It was kind of a wake-up call. My car was totaled and I didn't have a scratch on me. Many years later, I'm like, my knee hurts. I think that was related, but kind of walked out of it saying like, am I okay? Going up to another car saying like, am I actually here? And, I was 26 and I really had been thinking for years, like, I want to learn Spanish. I want to travel. I want to do this yoga training. I want to, see more of the world, all these things. And I had just kind of always put it off thinking like, well, when this bill is paid, when this is done, when I get to this point, then I'll do those things. And for me, that accident was something that just was, I think there were kind of taps and whispers ahead of that. And it was a bit of the like shaking me to awake. And so I left that accident and, tried going back and just going to work and doing the thing and getting a new car. And I just like in the depths of my soul knew that wasn't right. So I ended up traveling for 9 months in South America. It was, a journey to kind of get to that point. I had a panic attack before I ever left. I had never really like internationally traveled by myself.
It was the fear of the unknown.
It was totally the fear of the unknown. And then, a month into it, I was just like, oh, this is great. I'm awesome. Like, no worries. And I thought I was only going to be there for a few months, and I extended, and I taught myself how to build websites during that time because I had started filming and, learning how to film and edit. and had met up with someone there who was in film in Hollywood. And so we worked on several projects together. I think I even played with like DJing and stuff like that. I took Spanish classes and did a yoga teacher training in Guatemala, and, did all these things that I felt like, if not now, when? And that was like, that came kind of simultaneously. So just before that, and this is the big piece. So actually, while I was still a nurse, while I was still working in the ICU, I should say, I went to this art show at the very first co-working space that I can remember in San Diego. And at that art show, I met this guy, Pete, and he mentioned that there was going to be a meeting for TEDx. And basically, I invited myself to a meeting for the organization committee for TEDx in San Diego. And because I went to that, and because I was surrounded by people for a season of my life where I saw, oh, wow, like these are actually my people, these creators, these storytellers, and I got to see a part of myself, I think that like cracked something open. And then the events that followed that were just divinity, if you want to call it that.
So up until that point, you kind of didn't really identify as being a creator or a storyteller until you were sort of wrapped in that community?
I think it gave me the reflection. Exactly. I think there was always, that maybe that aspect of myself was always there. And I had painted and loved like creating, right? But I had always kind of othered that from my identity. And I honestly think that the thing I found in the TED community was just that life was like about the possibility, and that like all these things, these solutions existed, and it was about being able to like create a stage for those things to be shared with the world. And if more people knew about them, then we could solve some of our challenges. And what I started to feel was like I was getting people at the wrong point in their life. I was working in the end, and I was working in this like triage one at a time. And I really felt
when you were in
like
nursing, you mean?
Yeah. So I really felt like that break when I traveled for 9 months, it basically like deprogrammed, all of that. Just very like rigid structure that I had kind of like gone into things with, this map of life of like, this is what it's gonna be like. And then I was like, I have no idea what it's gonna be like.
Was that freeing or was that scary? Sort of this like, I give up control. I don't know where it's going.
Yeah, I think, man, it's been like such a spectrum, right? I feel like I came from this very like, I'm going to take every class I can at night and summer and do these and my degree, and then this is the next thing, and I'll be married by this age, and right, like having it all mapped out like we think we do, but very structured and very rigid like the ICU is. And I went from that to like this totally other side of like, I'm just gonna travel. I'll barter my work. I can do this. I'm gonna make a documentary about this musical instrument because I think it's interesting, and just very like free, but then also in that a bit of for sure feeling like, wait, who am I? Like, am I a producer? Am I an entrepreneur? And actually that's like next chapter there of understanding what entrepreneur meant, and being able to see that in myself. But I like the word producer because it is to create. And I think we could all like identify with that in some way. I'd say that I've now kind of oscillated back into a center point where it's like, no, you need some of the structure, right? It's good to have routines. It's good to use a calendar. It's like all of these things. And it's good to have like a look out and have those visions of what you're building. But at the same time, not to be too rigid, right? So.
Yeah, you hit on something that has always been a really interesting concept to kind of wrestle with. And it's this it's one thing to say like we are not, what our job is, right? We are more than that. But for so many of us, myself included, it's hard to sort of pull that apart. And so it can feel very confusing, very disorienting when you had something that anchored at least a portion of your identity, like nursing, and now you're sort of jumping out into this great unknown. And there's some excitement there, but it's also like, yeah, how do I fit into this world? Like, what's my title? What's my role? What do I contribute? What do I take? And I hear you kind of wrestling with some of these things.
Yeah, and what will people pay me for that I do also, right? That's a question. I mean, I started out kind of working in this like film storytelling piece because it just kind of came upon, I guess, in tandem with the TEDx production. But what I loved around TEDx was helping people tell their story and just the power of the narratives and how our stories shape our reality. And so I got to meet a lot of amazing people while I did that work. And I guess somehow over the course of time and experiences, I started working with some startup teams as well around kind of their pitch and storytelling. And so that sort of came through when I met Brant Cooper, who recently passed away, but has been a mentor and a very, very good friend of mine for over a decade. And I met him when I was producing TEDx. I think it was about the second time I had worked in this, and I was directing with Patty Stetson, a friend of mine as well still. And, he had just written The Lean Entrepreneur and was a New York Times bestselling author and kind of like consulted with all these large corporations around innovation. And basically, like, I met him and he's like, oh, this is natural to you. Like this whole lean methodology and agile method and just the way that you think about things, this is very natural for you. And pairing that with sort of the passion for storytelling and narrative building, it sort of kind of came not just like, oh, this is easy, but it developed, it evolved. And I think that's the thing is that we are, it's like Alan Watts says, like, who are you really? There's nothing else to know. I think that maybe that's like the journey in life, right? And so while we have all these different things that we do and identities, it's not a static thing. Like we are dynamic individuals, all of us.
So would you say that your time with TEDx and with Brant Cooper helped to inspire the decision to start A-Frame Venture Studio?
Oh my gosh, there's been so many things that have led up to A-Frame. I mean, I've worked with nonprofits, and I've seen the kind of the challenges around that, right? The model of doing good but requiring and being dependent on donations. I've seen and worked with founders who have been very impact driven but not focused on the capital side of things. And I've worked also in working closely with investors in kind of Web3 blockchain space, or, looking at more kind of traditional tech where it's very much about your returns and on the investment and just very, very cut and dry and not at all worried about the impact that it has on people or planet. And so I think that there was always this feeling of like, why do we have to choose between like doing good and making money? It's always felt like there should be some way to do both. And then I think that honestly, it's been years. It's probably been, I don't know, 4-5 5 years since I've like had the vision and really understood that a venture studio was probably like the vehicle to carry out what I saw. But I have felt like I have met so many amazing people who are just so talented in their creations and expertise that I enjoy creating with. And again, it's like I love and am excited by the potential of what we create together. And so, to be able to create a space and a way of creation, like how we create, to be able to experiment with that, to be able to really build an ecosystem and a system around that, that has been like, if you can figure that out, then like only, you can see how those things can kind of move through. And it wasn't just me. It was like finding the right person, which is my partner, Brad. And that was like, the ignition.
So I want to wrap my head better around what it means to be a venture studio. Do you have clients? Do you have portfolio companies? What are the services? What are they bringing to the table? How are you helping? Kind of paint a picture for us.
Yeah. It's evolved. And I think that a venture studio isn't a one size fits all kind of thing. So this is what we're doing. But usually a venture studio has a group of exited founders, or a specific kind of group of talent that's come together and are able to build. Sometimes they're building just as their own group. Sometimes maybe they have people that are coming in externally. The way that we've been building and designed A-Frame is that we work in a few different ways. So one is internal builds. So that includes acquisitions. So for instance, Mirth was an acquisition, and transforming that from a single bottom line into a triple bottom line business. We also, from outside of acquisitions, build from the ground up, from the idea all the way through launch and scale. And so that can come from our team, which is several of the things in motion now. So those are kind of one channel, is these internal innovations, this internal builds. Secondarily, we have this new team that just joined us, but this founders in residence, where we have people that have built something. They're usually a smaller team, maybe a solo or two founders. And, every startup needs certain things, and we've really built A-Frame to be able to fill those gaps and be that strong support structure, as well as sort of this like advisory board and still yet getting your hands in a bit more. And so we can come in and kind of operate as this like supercharged team with these founders. And so we support that company, usually with a stake of equity that we're taking in that company. So they become part of our portfolio, but they also become part of the A-Frame family, where we're able to support everything that comes their way. And we get to essentially make these decisions based on value aligned organizations as well, because there's something to like when all of these come together, that shared resource pool gets even stronger and stronger, as well as the lessons that we learn. And then the third piece is services. So we actually have a marketing company, a global marketing agency called Unusual Agency, which is led by our third principal. So it's myself, Brad Harris, and Luke Tobin, who are the three principals at A-Frame. And Luke's background is deep in agency building. He's had several successful exits from agencies that he's built. The last one just sold, I believe, to Brazil, South America. And so he has a family office in the UK and is leading the charge in building the Unusual Agency. And so that agency services our companies, right? Our internal builds. It gets to service these founders and residents. They get a great deal at the marketing that that everybody needs. And then we can also, when it's not a fit for the studio for us to actually be equity partners, we can still offer services. Or maybe a company just doesn't want to part with equity, right? And all they need is marketing. In that case, we can service them. And so we have that revenue stream that's like immediate. We have these like longer term builds that we're building because we see these trends and these gaps in the world. And then we have things like more immediate, where it's something like Mirth, where it's an acquisition and we're able to transform that, but we've already found product market fit. We already understand like the product is out there. And so that also kind of happens with the founders and residents because they'll be at different stages. But anyway, sorry, long-winded answer, but it's been complex to understand.
And so you guys there's a lot of design, a lot of marketing services. You guys have had a lot of experience in helping to build and launch brands before. So that's a big part of the value that you're bringing to the table. Are you also able to help them get access to capital? Because if I understand it correctly, that's not something that A-Frame does. You're not investing capital, you're investing your skills into them, sometimes in exchange for equity. But do you have sort of partners or other folks in your network that you can often introduce them to?
Yeah, so in some cases, I mean, I think that's what's really cool about working with Luke as well. He has that investment. He's actively investing. And so in some cases, it may be that there's a company that he is investing in that actually would make sense and is going to have a higher likelihood of success in working with us. So there's a strategic reason as well that, Luke's involvement makes sense not only for us, but for him. I think that a big part of what we are looking at in the near future is raising a fund so that when ideas have gone through the validation process and passed certain gates, we're able to allocate cash to those, as well as to those portfolio brands that are already in the portfolio. I would say the other piece is that we are working with every brand being investor ready. So that is definitely a gap for many of the brands that we work with and that are coming on. They're looking at, yes, they need to be resourceful, they need to raise, and yet, they're not going to pass due diligence. They need help with their P&L. They need help on really making that picture clear, or maybe their marketing analytics aren't there. They don't have the story there for an investor to fully buy in, or they just haven't reached a point where they're actually investable yet. And so we're going to help them get to that point. So that's always part of the trajectory. Where the capital comes from depends on, where they're at in their journey, as well as, I guess, where we're at as well. Because we're, like I said, looking at that fund, but we have been building relationships with investors throughout kind of the life cycle of investment. So, whether it's pre-seed or really looking at like Series A or larger investments, we're building those relationships so that we have that pipeline to support.
What's the difference between single bottom line and triple bottom line?
Well, profit would be a single. People and planet is usually the other two lines. And I mean, the difference is intention. I would say is that, some people think this doesn't make sense, but I think everything you do makes an impact, whether you're measuring it or not. And if you are intentional around what you're creating, you can create something that is going to bring strong returns for your investors, a great exit for the founder, or, long-term success for them. But they're also going to impact and improve lives. They're not going to do harm to the environment. They're going to thoughtfully make decisions. It does take effort. It takes maybe a bit more time in some cases, but I think having that thoughtfulness and that intention is what we need now. Like, we cannot sustain venture capital, all of this can't sustain in the way that it's been done. And our planet can't sustain. Our lives as humans here will not sustain if we continue doing things the way that they've been done. So,
tell me about Mirth Water.
Yeah, Mirth is the brand I mentioned that was an acquisition. So the story of Mirth is it was originally, it's these cute little emojis on the cans. Okay. Each one of these flavors had a face on it, and it was sold in stores like Erewhon and, several other small markets. And there was a lot of, testing being done in the grocers and speaking with the clients, and the feedback was that it really turned their kids' heads, which was interesting because it was at that time very much the founder had really built it out as sort of a seltzer, maybe a mixer. It was more of an adult male demographic that they were targeting. But all this data was showing us that kids really liked it. And of course, I mean, it was cute and it looked like the cans themselves could be a toy. So we found Mirth. Actually, my partner Brad had recently exited his last company and was looking at what was next. And, it was Mirth that we found after he had spoke with hundreds of founders and kind of loved going on a choir and kind of learning about the pain points of these founders and the opportunities and looking at this. And so Mirth was one where it was a really great founder. He just couldn't dedicate the time to really taking it to the next level. There was strong traction. There was a good brand already built. And we thought that it would be pretty turnkey, but it ended up that, that triple bottom line question, we looked at it and really found that we had to do some product innovation as well. So we took Mirth from something that was made with natural flavors and like pure cane sugar. That was actually like benefit at the time in that first iteration for them. And really no nutritional value in there. And we took it and transformed the product into a hydrating, bubbly water that is made with 100% organic fruit juice, no added natural flavors or artificial flavors. And it has a hydration blend that's crafted by Buoy, which is a leading hydration supplement, which has 87 trace minerals, ocean electrolytes, and vitamin complex. And so it's clinically been trialed to show greater hydration, improve things in chronic illnesses like POTS. And so we felt really confident about partnering with Buoy and providing something that was not only going to taste great and kind of quench your thirst, but actually hydrate you. And so, I mean, that's what Mirth is. But the mission of it, like the core behind it, and the word mirth means the emotions of happiness and joy. And one thing that I was really aware of and our team was aware of is that we don't want to be toxic positivity. In fact, we really need to be able to talk about our feelings. And when you look at some of the challenges at the root cause of what's happening in our world, in schools and with children, I think that you can see that we need language. People need to be able to express themselves. They need to be able to connect. You're dealing with the constant technology and, the challenge of actually looking each other in the eye. The generations are losing the ability to express themselves with one another. So Mirth really stands at the center point of time spent outdoors, emotional well-being and communicating those feelings, and hydration. And so our tagline is feel all the little feels, we have these cute little fruit characters, and they talk about their emotions, and they introduce new words of vocabulary, and everything is really set around being in the outdoors. So our brand aesthetic is even built around things like Cotopaxi and Patagonia, and it should belong in the outdoors. So it's drinkmirth.com if anybody wants to look at it. But I'll take a break there.
Where can we find it?
So we are live on drinkmirth.com right now for pre-sales, and we'll be shipping in August. So very excited. It's the awkward in between moment right now where, want to like hand it out to people and don't have it in my hand yet. But it's honestly been such a joy to work on it because I just believe in the mission so deeply. And I think it's strangely like something that doesn't exist.
Yeah. It's super interesting. Do you still have relationships with some of the retailers that were carrying sort of the previous iteration of the product? Do you feel like you have a shot at getting back into that shelf space?
Yeah, we absolutely could. There's a bit of a methodology here, though, of within A-Frame of being really strong in direct to consumer and kind of proving through D2C channels first and creating demand for shelf space. What you deal with a lot of times is brands will go to retailers too early. They're paying high slotting fees and, really middlemen and trying to get on the shelves, or they're dealing with then not having enough runway to fulfill the production needs. And so we're really focused on having just a stellar D2C channel to start. And then, yes, we have those relationships and others. We're looking at some after school programs, things like that. That would be larger accounts. But we're, just really excited to kind of look at, it's a drink that's for kind of it's a family friendly drink. It's not just for kids. I mean, we're all kind of chronically dehydrated, truth be told. So to have something that's a refreshing, hydrating drink.
With a positive message attached to it, right?
Yeah. I mean, with something that we're really building this world around mirth where it's not just about, it happens to be a drink, and when we're hydrated, we can feel more and we are healthier and all of that. But I think at the core of it, it's about feeling all the little feels, including feeling hydrated.
And, you hit upon something sort of from the business perspective that I think a lot of people may not realize, especially if they haven't taken a product into retail stores before, which is, just getting the contract with the store. You want to go in Target or Walmart, wherever you're going to go. That's a big deal. It's a huge undertaking. But now the store wants to see if the product sells through, right? And that is incumbent upon the brand to drive that sort of demand there. So that's why your strategy is interesting. Like, let's build the brand recognition. Let's build the demand through D2C. And then when we can show, hey, we're selling X number of units, gives you a little bit more leverage when you go to have some of these conversations with retailers. And it gives them more comfort to want to move forward because you can show them that the demand, the brand recognition already exists.
Absolutely. They're not taking such a big risk with you, right? Yeah, it's interesting. We've looked at several other channels, vending machines, for instance. There's like this smart vending movement. We have a friend doing that. So we'll trial some of that. We talked about like bodega experiments where you kind of take a small batch and try it in different locations where you have kind of like the ideal target demographic. Maybe it's in Lake Tahoe in the summer, right? It's really advantageous for us because we have this very diverse and dispersed team geographically within A-Frame. There's about 20 of us probably. And so we have folks all over that can kind of not only be advocates for it, but kind of like walk it into stores even. And so we're really lucky to have that and to have the expertise of people like Chris, who's the founder of Knox Provisions, which is the binocular company now sold in REI, but he's taken brands from online into retail as well.
He's got the playbook. He's been there, done that.
Yeah, exactly. We have
that's a big deal.
A lot of great playbooks, and it's like, it's not one size fits all, but when you have sort of this encyclopedia, you're able to be like, okay, like let's talk to Chris on this one. So very helpful.
I'm kind of curious, Amber, you've got a lot of different experiences. You appear to me to have a variety of skill sets, but if you were to try to narrow it down, how would you define your superpower? No, you shake off the very notion of narrowing it down. Don't put me in a box.
No, I mean, it was fun. I was talking to somebody about like the challenge of defining yourself. And it's like, I've really gotten to the point where I'll say, like, I'm a vessel. I'm a vessel, and the form that it's going to come through might change, but that's what I am. But no, I mean, I guess if I'm going to like narrow it down, it's that I'm listening to the space between the words, and I'm listening to what it is that wants to be created, whether it's like through that person or through the market. And I think that the way that I want to create is highly intentional and highly collaborative. That humanity-centered design is a term that I fell in love with and that I went deeper into because it encompassed so much of my approach towards creating value. So I guess in essence, it's like I'm looking at how do we create the most value together for all stakeholders. And there's some strategy. There's like, a lot of creativity in there. I love thinking about how we're going to tell a story, or, what that brand's voice sounds like. So there's definitely a strong piece of the creative, but I love like looking at, just from the very conception of idea, like how are we actually going to get this going? And it's interesting because it's like we're working in consumer goods and tech, and a lot of studios are going to pick a very kind of narrow linear path. We're an AI studio. I mean, we have AI that we're working with. We have AI developers in our team. But what we're centered around is our values and this idea that we can improve health and well-being through what we create, and through really honoring that, like, also all of us are these dynamic creators, and so we're able to, I think, create things in a way that is very meaningful to the world. I don't know if that answered your question. I probably just avoided it in that answer, but
your answer was summed up in your physical reaction as you heard the question coming out of my mouth. I don't know if you realized it, but there was like a little twitch or like a mini seizure that took place there. So let's shift gears, because I appreciated one of the things that you were saying about Mirth, and one of the messages is sort of feel all the feels. And, sometimes, as we go through life, there's hardships, and that's easier said than done. I would be curious, Amber, to hear about a serious challenge that you have overcome in your life, whether it's personal or professional, how you got through that and what you learned.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, gosh, there's still challenges, right? I think that, I have lost myself at times in the work. I've just straight up lost myself at times. And I think one of the biggest challenges has just like been to be okay with being interested in who I'm becoming and, not comparing myself. Because I've been driven by this, I don't know. I honestly like the driving force of everything I've done is around this idea of like, I know that we're capable of meeting the needs of today. I know that we're capable of so much more than we're giving ourselves credit for. I know that like what we believe is our reality right now is really constructed from each of our point of views and the words that we choose and the beliefs that we have and how we choose to share that and where we're giving our attention. And so I think it can become really overwhelming to kind of like see all the possibility and then feel like, oh my gosh, how am I going to ever kind of like answer this calling personally? Because I know that it takes all of us. So it's this crazy thing of like, it isn't ever going to be just me. It's always about all of us. And so I think that getting out of my own way, and any time that like ego comes in, and usually that's in the shape of fear, but anytime that comes in, like being able to get back to a place where I'm remembering, like, for one, it's not just me. I'm not alone in this, and also, yes, it is very big, but it's one step at a time. And like, because the anxiety that can come with, or the overwhelm that can come with taking on something real is intense. So I've dealt with anxiety. I've had periods of depression. I have luckily had yoga in my life, which definitely is a core piece of mental health for me. I've had economic struggles. I did not come from a well-to-do family. As I mentioned, like went to college, worked hard, and because I didn't have any safety net, that feeling of scarcity has played a part in my life at times. And I get it when founders, are struggling in that way. And when they're working full time and trying to get something started at the same time. So I don't know if there's one struggle. I mean, I think that identity crises have been a big part, like the sort of the feeling of, who am I to be in this room?
Not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that thing of imposter syndrome, people talk about that all the time, but it's like, as long as you're pushing yourself, you're going to have that, because you're going to be constantly putting yourself in rooms where you're being called upon, you're calling upon yourself to be more, to be able to kind of rise to the occasion, right? And so I've had plenty of moments where I have felt like, yeah, this feeling of, I guess like it's a feeling of like being found out, like, oh man, I don't feel that so much anymore, to be quite honest. Because I guess maybe it's a combination of feeling comfortable in my own skin and also just like having done the work, literally just doing this work for so long. I'm like, no, like I know something now. But
and this idea of imposter syndrome, it comes up with a lot of people I know, a lot of folks that have been on this show, a lot of very successful, well-accomplished people. One of my guests, Gary Fry, actually wrote a book called Silence the Imposter. Because this is a very powerful thing. There's sort of this disconnect between what you can do and examples of what it is that you've done, and there's sort of this negative voice that comes in and diminishes those things and disqualifies you, before you even start on things. And so it's interesting. I can't remember the name of the particular guest I had on several months ago, who actually developed a positive relationship with his imposter syndrome. Said he had actually turned it around to be a superpower. It was the thing that kept him every morning hopping out of bed, ready to prove himself again. Pushing himself forward. He just kind of looked at it as this little kick in the butt, rather than it being sort of like this thing that kind of weighed him down and made him question himself. It was kind of fuel for the productive fire, so to speak.
Like having a disapproving parent or something that you're like, I'm going to prove you wrong, Mom. I can do it. I have a very supportive mother, but
you can imagine other people have been through that scenario. Sure. So I think that's a good way to frame it. And you mentioned yoga is something that's been really helpful to you kind of when you go through these times of struggle. Is there anything else that you found that you can sort of rely on, go back to?
Sorry, I've got my little girl Maya barking in the background. I was trying to yes, I think that community honestly has been the biggest thing. To have people that you can talk to, and when you're not all right, that you can really just drop in with throughout many years. Long-term relationships are important, to have people who have been with you through different seasons of life, be able to remind you like, no, you're not a loser. Remember all those great things you did.
When you can't find the internal voice to give yourself that encouragement, it is so helpful to have people that you know, love, and trust who can provide you that voice.
Right? Yeah, family, my mom is still someone who I can call, and sometimes it's just her holding space, saying that she's thinking of me or something, but just that knowing you're not alone. Exercise is really important. Just to be able to sweat. Sometimes it's a good cry. I think, I mentioned kind of the mental health piece of things, and everybody has their path. But for me, it's like, I got to feel it. I got to be with it. I got to let it move through me. I got to recognize, like, I am not this feeling, but this feeling is with me right now, and that's okay.
Does this kind of lend into the book idea that you had mentioned to me in off air?
The Naked Truth of the Creative Life, my forever non-written book. I've actually started writing a little bit, and I've actually done some interviews around it. But I think we all, there's that saying of like, don't compare your insides to someone else's outsides, right? And I think especially in entrepreneurship and in business, it's like very easy to see the success. To be quite honest, just to go back to this like thing of feeling like somebody would find out, truth be told, I think early on that there was this perception that I had like made it, or that I like had more money than I had or something like that. And I never like put that out there, but there was just, because I was doing what I was doing, and I didn't care if I had to eat bean and cheese burritos to do what I wanted, like to be doing this thing, I was going to do it. I was going to live my life. I think that perception of success that people had, where it was like, you have to define what your happiness is. You have to define for yourself what success is, because who cares what the rest of the world is going to look at you and see? But we do tend to fall into that trap of like, oh, this person has made it, they're successful, etc. And we often don't see all the moments of falling apart, all the times we almost gave up, the times we had to have a friend remind us that we're not a loser. And, I think that, yes, the book is like, actually, it involves some some beautiful photography is the image that I have of like each of these people in their kind of rawness in their moment and sharing their story of kind of the naked truth of like the lows that we hit. And you know, we know ourselves, or the world knows us usually for the highs, but we know ourselves often for the lows. I mean, how often do we do that? Like, look at ourselves and think of it as like the things we could have done better, the opportunity we missed, you know, the conversation we should have had. So, yeah.
I'm glad you're giving voice to this, and I hope to be able to read that book someday. You know, it's part of the message that I try to help my guests communicate on this show, which is, yeah, there's sort of this natural human tendency where we compare our messy insides to what appear to be, you know, other people's polished exteriors, not knowing what's really going on, what the full story is, what they're dealing with, what they went through to kind of get to wherever it is you think that they are. And I wonder if maybe this might be the answer to my final question. But before I ask it, I want to let people know the best way to get in touch with you or to follow your story, Amber. What would that be?
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn as Amber Brandner. That's Brandner. I have a website, amberbrandner.com. We have aframeventurestudio.com. And I'm Amber at afbs.bc.
And we've got drinkmirth.com where you can place pre-orders now.
Most important one.
Yeah. Recording now in kind of the middle part of June 2025 and orders to hopefully be shipped in August sometime. So the last question I've got for you, Amber, we've had a nice conversation here today. I hope to stay in touch. Maybe a year from now, we're sitting down together and you're celebrating something. What's that thing you hope to be celebrating?
I mean, a year from now, if I'm looking at the trajectory, we're raising and have our first few checks for our fund. You know, it is a necessary piece of the puzzle. And I think it is probably around that in terms of the timeline. I think the other thing is just to feel balanced and feel satisfied and happy and healthy. I think those things are oh so important. I mean, ultimately, you know, without feeling good, without feeling kind of centered and that creative life force moving through you, it's very hard to create, right? Anything worthy. And so I think that being in that place as often as possible would be something to celebrate.
I love it. Amber Brandner from A-Frame Venture Studio and Mirth Water. I want to be the first to thank you for sharing both your time and your story with us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure chatting with you today.
Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thanks for learning with us today.